Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's CUGC User Share webinar. We are going to talk all about the battle for the enterprise, which means that the battle is for Citrix Cloud and the enterprise. So we're going to find out all about what you need to think about, things that you need to consider, lots of good stuff on that. But before we get into it, I want to go over a couple of things for you. Just a reminder that you should pop on out to mycugc.org and find your local group. We have over 75 CUGC local groups around the world, and they are always meeting. I know over here in the US, the week of the 20th is a big Star Wars movie premiere week, so we have a lot of local groups that are doing their next meetup at the Star Wars premiere. So definitely check out our events calendar and find your group and get involved. And I will throw a link to those to the events calendar into the chat in just a little bit for you. Also want to mention a couple of Citrix things coming up. Next week is the Employee Experience Virtual Summit. It's a full day event, keynotes, technical sessions all day about making your employee experience better. And CUGC will have a booth there, so we'd love for you to stop by and say hello. Also, a reminder that this month is the best time for you to buy your Citrix Synergy Pass. It's buy one, get one free. That's the best deal you're going to see, so definitely check that out, and I will have links for you on the chat for those as well. All right, so today, our program, we are going to be recording this webinar, and you will receive a link to the recording in email tomorrow. It's going to come directly from GoToWebinar, so just be on the lookout for that. Also, want you to submit your questions at any time in the question box. We'll be keeping an eye on those. We're going to reserve most of them for the end of the presentation, but if something's pertinent and seems like it's really important and can't wait, we'll maybe pop in with one of those, but the majority of them we'll get to at the end. And also at the end, I'll be giving you a link to a short survey. It's for CUGC use only. It's anonymous, and we just like to get your feedback on all of our webinars. All right, so who's with us today? We have David Wilkinson. He is moderating the Q&A for us, so he's going to be keeping an eye on those questions. He is a CTP, and he's involved with the UK CUGC group. David, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everybody. I'll be monitoring the questions and answers window. If I can answer during the presentation, I will. Otherwise, we'll bring the questions to Gareth at the end, especially the difficult questions. Thanks.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Gareth Carson presenting for us today. He is a CTP, also involved in the UK CUGC group, so you may have seen him there last week, I think. And with that, I'm going to hand things directly over to Gareth to get us started and get into our presentation. So here comes the screen.
Okay.
That's your screen there, so everybody can see it, Gareth.
Great stuff. Okay, so welcome everybody. Hopefully for the next 45 minutes, I'm going to try and keep you entertained and discuss why Citrix Cloud is an enterprise-ready solution. So I've got a lot to get through, so if we can save the questions for the end, that would be preferred, but Dave will come in, and if there are pressing questions, we'll try and answer them when we can. The goal really of this webinar is to highlight some of the great features that I think the Citrix Cloud has and why it's basically a good time to revisit this strategy and way of thinking. So basically, I'm going to, for those who do not know me, my name is Gareth Carson, and I work for as an enterprise architect, and I've been in that role for over a year now. I've been involved in robotic process automation projects and various Citrix projects during that time. My current role, I'm back in the Citrix world, providing on the on-premises platform. Before that, I worked at Ultimate Business Solutions, where I was a end-user computing team lead. and I've worked with Citrix technologies in general now for a good few years. I'll occasionally deliver some webinars, blogs, and useful insights for the Citrix community. And during this community journey, I've picked up a few accolades and met a few great people, all good stuff. So the agenda, what I'm going to talk about during this webinar is what Citrix Cloud isn't and what it is. I'm then going to delve into some architecture concepts for those who aren't familiar with the Citrix Cloud. I'll then go through some enterprise features that I believe we need to talk about. Then I'm going to talk about identity, some identity features and identity roadmap that you get with the Citrix Cloud. And then I'm going to talk about costs and licensing and basically how you should approach this on your journey to the Citrix Cloud. It's not all rosy. I do like to give a bit of yin and yang with any solution. So I will talk about issues with the Citrix Cloud and basically how to overcome them. After that, I'm going to delve into a feature set. Time permitting, we've got 7, and I'll drill into each one in a bit more detail. So first off, I'm going to talk about what the Citrix Cloud isn't. So it's not a cloud platform in the traditional sense of Google, Azure, and AWS. Citrix aren't providing you their own Citrix Cloud hosted platform. It's a platform as a service. And what I mean by this, it's a collection of services that Citrix provide you, and it sits on their chosen infrastructure as a service provider. So the real difference between the solution and other infrastructure as a service solutions is you're not paying for the compute, you're not paying for the resource costs, you're also not paying for servers, storage, networking, and data center costs. So what exactly are Citrix offering us? So as I've just briefly mentioned, basically this is the best phrase to describe it. It's a collection of services that Citrix hosts, but allows you to administer. So as you can see in this screenshot at the top, we've got the Citrix Cloud. And in this Citrix Cloud, we've got all the usual infrastructure that you'll find on on-premises deployments. Your Studio, your Director, your license management, you've got your delivery controllers, your SQL servers. All of this is hosted in the Citrix Cloud, and that infrastructure is managed by Citrix. At the bottom, you can see we've got a resource location, and this can be your on-premises location, which can be in a data center, it can be in a public cloud of choice. But this is the stuff that the customer will manage. So you've got your Active Directory, your group policies, your VDAs, your image management, all that lovely stuff. Now, what the Citrix Cloud introduces is a new component that links these two locations together, and it's called a Cloud Connector. Now, I like to call the Cloud Connector a proxy delivery controller, because in effect, it does proxy all the communication outbound into the Citrix Cloud. So now we've touched on the security. The control plane only gets access to your metadata, such as usernames, machine names, and application shortcuts. So it's restricting the access to the customer's intellectual property from the control plane. In case you're wondering, if you've got a QR scanner on your phone, you can use that scan code to take a picture of that reference architecture, and it will take you to further reading. So let's look at a different architectural slide highlighting the Citrix Cloud. In this view, we're highlighting the clear benefit of moving to the Citrix Cloud and its high availability of the infrastructure components. We can see that in the cloud plane. resiliency is part of the cloud offering. So your SQL, your licensing, your Studio, NetScalers with multiple POPs of presence, your delivery controllers, they're all highly available. Now, the big draw here in terms of this is if you've ever had to do capacity and sizing of infrastructure, you don't really need to think about that here because it's taken care for you. Now, that to me is quite a big draw, attractive draw of moving to the Citrix Cloud. In terms of the resource location, at the bottom, we will utilize N+1 in the same way, but it's your decision to make. All communications to cloud will go via the cloud connectors unless you utilize something called the rendezvous protocol. And this effectively channels the client to server communication direct to the VDAs through the gateway service in the cloud plane. The reason you might want to do this is to allow your connectors to scale more efficiently in the enterprise. And there is, I think it's enabled by default, but you can control it by a group policy setting, which is highlighted in the screenshot. The next architecture representation, so this is going to highlight the DR capability with Citrix Cloud, and it shows the two resource locations or that have replication of user data and applications between them. And what you'll find is the user will access the access and control layers in the Citrix Cloud, and they'll be able to connect to one of those site locations. And this is controlled much in the same way as using zones for your on-premises infrastructure. Now, in the event that you lose one of your resource locations, users are still going to be able to connect through those access and control layers in the Citrix Cloud and connect to their other resource location. So when you look at this then becomes quite a cost-effective way of achieving business uptime and a DR solution. So note that you don't have to replicate your Citrix infrastructure. I'll touch upon how we combat the loss of the Citrix Cloud plane later on. So one of the reasons I chose this topic was due to the fact there have been a lot of changes with the Citrix Cloud during my time away from Citrix as my primary focus. A lot of the concerns people did have back in the day that prevented a move to Citrix Cloud, they've been addressed. Identity and access management was one of them. Now, Citrix have been listening and they've provided a host of identity solutions and options that you can use and leverage. We all know these days that username and password doesn't satisfy modern security requirements. So Oscar Day and his team at Citrix, they've been busy working behind the scenes to give us these variety of identity options. So the first one we've got is Active Directory plus token. And this was introduced as a simple method of two-factor using a one-time password. It's really easy to implement, and there's no need for any on-premises two-factor authentication infrastructure. For those who have existing identity solutions, we've got the Gateway IDP, Identity Provider, introduced. And the main driver for this, if you're an enterprise and you've already invested in an expensive identity solution and you want to leverage this existing technology, you can now, even moving to the Citrix Cloud. This is done by redirecting your cloud access to a gateway on-premise. Basically, whatever your front-ending, whatever two-factor authentication you're front-ending your gateway with, you're able to utilize. So later on, hopefully I'll show you how this works. Citrix Cloud will also provide you the option of federating authentication over to Okta using an Active Directory sync mechanism via an agent. Why you'd want to do this, again, I'll show you in a demo and it will be discussed a bit later on. So we now have FAS, Citrix Cloud Federated Authentication Services in the cloud. One of the bugbears and many, it's been long overdue. Quite simply, if you are using a federated identity for your authentication, you're going to need FAS. You're going to need FAS to enable the single sign-on to your virtual apps and desktops. So it's much the same with Azure AD. If you're using Azure AD today for your federation, you're going to need FAS. So for a good way to see where all this identity is heading, I've attached a link highlighting a blog by Jason Samuel, fellow CTP, and it's to do with passwordless authentication and access to Citrix Cloud. It's a fun thing to read, take a look, and you can get a good idea where we're heading. So it doesn't stop there. There is more identity features that are coming. I don't have dates, but these are all on the roadmap. We're going to have Google as an identity provider. We're going to have bring your own SAML. We're going to get native radio support. And with the management planes, the cloud management portal, we've got Citrix Identity plus one-time password, and we're going to get Active Directory support. So you're going to have more role-based access control over who can actually manage this environment. So the titles that you see coming in red, I'll delve into more detail. So we'll not talk about these features at this stage. What I will talk about though is configuration logging. So this now is in the Citrix Cloud, and this basically captures your Citrix virtual apps and desktops, deployment configuration changes, your administrative activities, and it captures all this information to a logging database in the Citrix Cloud. So it will help you track. Go on.
Yeah. Why would that be useful? Why would that be needed for enterprise?
Because, I mean, we can track changes, it's for change control, and also you're not using on-premises SQL.
Great.
So the other thing we've got is site aggregation. So very overlooked feature. Now we can bring in our own legacy environments into the cloud. So there's no excuses for that one application on old Citrix environments to stop the cloud migration strategy. Simply just add your legacy site to your workspace, and this provides access to applications in both environments. So it's seamless for the users. I have said it's a very overlooked feature. It's a great way also to present one application stroke desktop instead of duplicates, and you can control which environment the users will launch the application from. So it should be a no-brainer for any migration strategy. So FAS, I've already touched upon it. It provides a solution to enable that single sign-on to apps and desktops using Federated Identity. And we've got WEM, Workspace Environment Manager. So this is a user persona tool. So it's going to provide the look and feel for the user environment, as well as provide app locker functionality. It's going to process your GPOs faster as it's multi-threaded. It will provide you shortcuts. It will also provide you with resource optimization, if I can say it right, with CPU and memory. The big plus point here is that you no longer require on-premises SQL. So what I'm trying to get the point here, it doesn't stop there. We have other benefits with the Citrix Cloud. So if you do want to get into bed with the Citrix Cloud, you've also got to think about the hard and soft costs. Now, by this, what I mean is soft costs are basically things that are hard to justify, they're hard to prove. So we'll run through a list of them. You've got things like acquisitions. So if you're a company and you're taking another one on board, with a traditional on-premises infrastructure, you've got a lot of tin here to manage, and it's a complex project, and it can, it needs planning and it can be messy. With the Citrix Cloud, it's a lot of a simpler solution. So you would just put in a cloud connector, create a new resource location, put in the cloud connector into that environment. You'd amend the VDA, the image, so it points to that cloud connector, do whatever tidying up, cleanup that you need to do, and you can then manage that environment through the Citrix Cloud management portal. So it's a lot easier. In terms of lock-in, you have a choice of where you're going to put your VDA workloads. So you can choose Google, Azure, Amazon. There is no cloud lock-in. The Citrix Cloud will also give you a flexible approach to migrate to the Citrix Cloud. And by this, you have things called hybrid rights agreements, which we'll mention more in a minute. My advice is when you're doing a migration, choose your simple workloads first, prove the success, gain the confidence, and then you can tackle your difficult workloads, difficult applications, and migrate over with that strategy. Goes without saying that your tech operations are reduced because all the complex back-end infrastructure is actually now managed by Citrix, so you don't have to worry about that. There is also a shift in terms of CapEx to OpEx models. So financials will like this simply because they don't want to have this huge, large one-off sum with this huge, large one-off unexpected cost. So I know for CSPs, there are monthly subscription costs, and there are deals to be had in terms of how you pay with the Citrix Cloud. The adoption to Citrix Cloud is also quite quick because the infrastructure is already there. It's there managed for you. So the time to get a greenfield solution up and running or a POC set up is very quick indeed. The other aspect that's a big advantage, you've got this single cloud plane management portal, and from there you're able to actually manage your different resource locations, which could be located in different geographical areas. So you're not actually, compared to on-premises where you're going to have to duplicate that on-premises infrastructure, this is certainly a big draw. I've touched upon the capacity, the fact that you don't have to think about the capacity and the sizing with the back-end infrastructure. And obviously, you don't need on-premises SQL for your virtual apps and desktops. So the hard costs, these are easier to justify. So this is your software and hardware maintenance and your warranty. That's reduced, or you get rid of it with your infrastructure. The upgrades in the Citrix Cloud as well, the Citrix maintains and takes care of the upgrades of that infrastructure for you. I'm going to talk about that also and how Citrix approaches this. Citrix will also give you automation efficiencies, and by that they'll give you tools to keep down the costs of your workloads in public clouds, and I'll mention that too. We've touched upon the reduced infrastructure. So you get all these soft and hard cost benefits. We've gone through a few enterprise features. So when you weigh it up, there are quite a lot of advantages of moving to the Citrix Cloud. However, at some point, you're going to get to the point where you're going to need to talk about licensing. And when you do that, you might actually find yourself in a situation like this. So there's a few things to know and note about licensing. So first off, it's user only with Citrix Cloud, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service. The only solution with cloud solution that will give you concurrent licensing is if you go for the Workspace Premium Plus package. Citrix will also provide hybrid rights, which will allow you a period to migrate to the Citrix Cloud. So this is beneficial because you can migrate at your own pace. It will give you time to get those bad applications updated and moved over and tested to wherever you're going, wherever you want your workloads to be hosted. If you are carrying out an adoption of or a trade-up package with hybrid rights, what you need to note is the perpetual licenses will be rescinded upon purchase. So what actually happens is your licenses are replaced with the agreed term on-premises licenses for a license model and an agreed term. So in a nutshell, you're only going to get the same licensing as you purchase for your cloud subscription. Any other users will have terminated licenses. So the next aspect of licensing you've got to think about is the cost implications of licensing. So you're not comparing apples with apples here. It's not a like for like service. So on first impression, it may come across as expensive, but you get a whole host of features we've mentioned and haven't mentioned yet, and cost saving ability. So I'll state here, in my opinion, if you actually think a move to a cloud is about cost saving, then you should reevaluate why you are actually going to the cloud. I don't like giving cost figures out simply because it is negotiable. So before you're scared off, have you actually picked up that phone and spoken to Citrix? Because there are deals to be made. Citrix is a cloud-first company and they want you to move to the cloud. And all the development and all the features are cloud first. So here we can see an example of the licensing insights feature. This can be run for on-premises workloads too. It provides detailed information on license usage, reports, and it's going to highlight on a daily, weekly, monthly basis the license usage and devices that you're actually using. So it's useful because it provides those insights and it shows you that you can free up costs by reducing licenses. So I've mentioned that there is a weakness in the cloud, and I do like to give a bit of yin and yang on this. Citrix Cloud, from a user perspective, it's pretty much on par with on-premises, but for the administrator, there are some things to highlight and mention. Some of you who use the Citrix Cloud, you may have had an interesting time with the console. It can be slow, unintuitive. It's been known to crash at times. Now, with all the known issues around this, Citrix are working hard to address this behind the scenes. So it's only a matter of time that, that this is actually changed to an HTML5 solution. I've also heard a lot of stories of policies disappearing. Now, you could end up recreating policies as currently they're not backed up anywhere, so in the Citrix Cloud. So my advice, it's probably advisable to continue to utilize your GPO at the Active Directory level, so you are in complete control of this. I have heard lately, apparently there is a way that potentially you can back up your Citrix Cloud policies. I've not done it myself. So if you're running a group policy management console from a cloud connector using the remote SDK for the cloud, it will throw up an authentication box. You'll log into your cloud, and apparently you're able to pull your policies or your policy information from the cloud and back it up yourself. So this was a tip that Shane Kleinart pointed out to me. So we've got the great Autoscale service. So this, in its default config, it can shut down a whole host of one-to-one VDIs, which may prevent user access. So depending on your environment, assess and configure this as appropriate. So Autoscale is basically the new version of SmartScale. Security teams, they often complain about the broad whitelisting required to make cloud work. Now, although that's more an organizational oddity than a Citrix one, to be fair, you can do URL broad whitelisting. So whitelisting with wildcard domains can be utilized to avoid undue burden on the customer to whitelist a large number of subdomains for every Citrix Cloud service. There is a link to a useful configuration tool also for proxy and whitelisting on Citrix connectors. That's just below. So I've got authentication and enumeration here. Now, it's slightly longer, but not long enough for you to reach down and tie your shoelace. Once this process is complete, you've got direct connections via the gateway service or your on-prem gateway to VDA anyway. In my opinion, it's probably not worth mentioning, but I did. WEM, so the issue with WEM, you don't get any on-premise licensing for WEM. Now, I came in contact with a customer who thought that this was the case. It isn't. If you've got WEM with the Citrix Virtual Apps Desktop Service, it's cloud only. Now, the other thing to note is that at the moment, the management of WEM is in the USA region. It's not in the EU yet. This is coming. Now, what I'd say to this, WEM does utilize a WEM cache on your VDAs. So the management and the location of it shouldn't really matter. Now, in terms of the agent and the communication to the back end, it's still prone to issues that on-premises WEM has, in that you might have to tackle known issues to restart the agent so it communicates to the back end. So it's the same in the Citrix Cloud. So also when localhost cache kicks in, there is an issue where Storefront can mistakenly see controllers as offline, and you have to change a default setting in Storefront from 60 minutes down to 1 to combat this problem. And the link provided gives the detail on the advanced settings to change within the Storefront store. So I've mentioned that we're going to touch upon how Citrix Cloud approaches updates and upgrades. So they do this by utilizing something called the Canary Program. And every 2 weeks, there are feature updates in the Citrix Cloud. And when this happens, there are also updates on your cloud connectors. So some people have been taken by surprise by when their connectors are updated and they've found their environment might be down. They may not have had N+1 of their cloud connectors, or there have been other issues. Now, administrators want to know exactly when upgrades happen. So they'd like to see into a crystal ball and know exactly when there could be potential issues, and they don't want any nasty surprises from their Canary program. So Citrix Cloud have now introduced scheduled updates for cloud connectors. So now you can actually set the time that your cloud connectors are upgraded. In terms of the actual Citrix Cloud environment and how they do the feature releases, Citrix have a release A and a release B environment, and they will migrate users over or customers over in phased batches to a new environment with a new feature release. And once they've done that, the release B environment will be updated, and they will start that process again where they will move customers over in phased batches. So it's a 4 to 5 day process to migrate customers to new code. If issues are observed, they do issue a hard stop until the issue is actually resolved. There is also something called opt-in and opt-out with the Canary program. I like to actually term this as first in, last in. So you can actually wait until 100% state is achieved in a feature release. I've mentioned that they do issue a hard stop if there are problems detected. Rollback can be done within minutes. The more cloud connectors you have, the longer this process will actually take. So that's just something to note. So we got a bit of connector 101 here. Things that you need to note, take home with you. You've got to have N+1, and by that I mean N+1 at all times. So if you are getting the Citrix Cloud connector updated, make sure that you've got 2 others that aren't. So it's basically, let's have a minimum of 3. Trouble, if your connectors do have trouble, it's easy to troubleshoot. Basically, you will log into your resource location, remove the connector from your resource location, then log on to your connector machine, uninstall the software, reboot, log back onto the machine, log back onto the Citrix Cloud from that machine, the resource location, deploy the software down again, and just go through the wizard, and that should fix the issues. So the connector will also use proxy settings in the context of the installing user. So all connector services will run as a local service. To configure support for your services to use a proxy, you're going to have to run that netsh command that's shown in the slide. And with connectors, like most things, CPU is the constraint. So when localhost cache kicks in, you're going to get registration storms, which is very CPU heavy. There is an article by LogNVSI on a sweet spot of sizing. So you should get about 4 or more CPU. I think LogNVSI, they say the sweet spot is actually 2 sockets, 3 cores. So just look up that article, Google it, you'll find it, and there's more information on sizing. If you want to know more about Citrix Cloud 101, there's an article in red at the bottom there underneath that cat. So I mentioned the automation efficiencies that Citrix Cloud gives you. You've got Autoscale, which basically allows you to control the costs of workloads in public clouds. So this is the new version of the deprecated Smart Scale. The advantage of this is that the management of it is now actually in Studio, whereas at Smart Scale you had a different management portal. So what it does, it allows you to control your public costs in a variety of ways, and it does this by giving you schedule-based scaling. So this is specifying the amount of machines you wish to be turned on at a specific time. You've also got load-based scaling, and this is when you're not sure how many users log in and you want to apply dynamic scaling capability within your delivery group. What I think is really neat is you can put in your machine costs of your public cloud workloads, and this integrates with Director. So basically you can show that to your bosses and highlight how much you've actually saved on a monthly basis or whatever it is, and say, look how good I am, I've saved you this much money this month, and try and aim for that pay rise before Christmas. A few bits of takeaways with Autoscale. Disabling machines will leave them in the current state. So if you do need to turn it off for any reason, it's not going to affect the current state of your workloads. It's only going to work with registered machines only as well. If your machines aren't registered, they can't be used to scale up or down. Now there is a new feature where you can create machines dynamically. It's in Tech Preview. Now that can be useful in cases where you don't have to think beforehand of the capacity to provision in your delivery group, but instead you're letting this happen, you're letting the provisioning happen dynamically based on the load within that delivery group. So it's going to save you on storage costs in your public cloud, along with the compute cost that you already saved with Autoscale version 1. It's currently script-based, and it's achieved by providing a high watermark and a low watermark in terms of load, and then you create and delete machines based on when those watermarks are crossed. It's script-based currently due to the fact that Citrix Cloud doesn't retain any administrative credentials. There are talks of making this into Studio, but Citrix are going to have to overcome that hurdle with the retaining passwords. So another feature I like to delve into is the local host cache. I know Mr. Wilkinson loves this feature. We've got users and they will broker to their storefront portal. They will choose their application desktop, log in, and be brokered to their relevant applications and desktops. Now, in the event that you lose your delivery controllers, what happens in the background is you've got the CSS synchronized service. This copies information to the secondary broker, high availability service, and the high availability service basically injects all that information into a local host cache database. Now, the reason for this is so if you did lose your delivery controller, a user can still access their portal, see their apps and desktops, and still be brokered to their VDA. Now, in traditional infrastructure, Citrix on-premises infrastructure, the local host cache is actually located on your delivery controllers. In the Citrix Cloud world, it exists on your cloud connectors. So a few takeaways with local host cache. You do need storefront. You are going to need storefront on premises for the local host cache. It does actually support server hosted apps and desktops. When the local host cache is actually in flight, you don't get any studio management. So you won't be able to manage the Citrix Cloud. You do get pooled VDI support. One thing to note is when the local host cache does kick in, your pooled VDI do go into maintenance mode. Now you can use these commands that are highlighted in red in the screenshot to change that behavior. And one thing to note is when you do that and normal operations resume, it doesn't have any adverse effect on those workloads on your pooled VDI. If you want to check that the local host cache does exist and it is where it is supposed to be, you'll find it in C Windows Service Profiles Network Service. It's called HA database name. You'll find an MDF and a log.ldf. There is further reading on this by my esteemed moderator, Mr. Wilkie. So if you can scan that code, it'll take you to further reading about the local host cache. One of the identity features that I highlighted was Gateway plus AAA redirect. So in effect, I've mentioned that you will have a user, they will access their workspace portal. What will happen then is their workspace portal will redirect them to the gateway on premises, and they will be able to leverage and utilize any two-factor authentication the enterprise is heavily invested in. So it removes another blocker, much like site aggregation removes that blocker for I've got an old application, So therefore, I can't migrate to the Citrix Cloud. So identity and old environments are some of the things that I used to hear a lot about that would stop people from their cloud migration strategy. So the way you'd set it up, you'd actually go into the Citrix Cloud and you'd go into an API section within the Citrix Cloud, and you'd get this client ID and this secret and a redirect URL. Now, the redirect URL would be your URL to your on-premises gateway, and you'd take this information and you'd basically create an OAuth profile on your on-premises NetScaler, putting in this information, and then you link the cloud to the gateway. And that's basically how it works. So I've got a demo recorded. Hopefully it's going to work. Now, in this demo, I'm using native one-time password as my two-factor authentication for my NetScaler. So what I'm highlighting here is a device a user's going to register. So this is the first time they're using it. So they access this manage one-time password internal site. They register their Android device. They use a Google Authenticator app or any authenticator app, scan that code. They're going to now test that they have registered. You'll get a numeric value on your phone. You'll input it and you'll test it. Now you'll go to your external workspace. It will redirect you to your on-premises gateway. It was quick, but you might have missed it. And you'll put in your code and you'll be able to authenticate to your virtual apps and your desktops. And you'll click your line of business critical application, obviously calculator in this instance, and you will see your application and desktop appear in front of your eyes. So another thing that has come into being, I don't know how many of you have heard of the hairpin loop scenario. In effect, there is a problem with users internal to an organization and they want to do a direct connection to a VDA. When you utilize the Citrix Cloud, you're actually going out through the gateway service, coming back in. So what the network location service will address, it makes your HDX sessions faster by allowing a direct client to VDA connection. Now, to do this, you configure network locations that correspond to where your VDAs in your environment are sitting. So you'll basically you'll define subnets in the network location service and a public IP and your public IP where your Citrix VDAs reside. Now, based on this, the network location service will know if you are internal or external to your organization. And if detected and you're internal, you will make a direct connection to your VDA. So this will actually help you avoid that hairpin loop connection. Now, to know that this is actually working, you can look into the ICA file and you will see UDP connectivity. You can also go to Director and you will see that UDP traffic is actually being utilized. So another identity feature that I want to touch upon is using Okta for Federated Identity. Now, in a nutshell, federation, it's a process where one system is responsible for the authentication of a user. That system then sends a message to a second system announcing who the user is and verifying that they were properly authenticated. So Gartner recently recognized Okta as a leader in the Magic Quadrant for access management. Why? Because workers demand freedom to use any device, application, or network they prefer, and they simply won't tolerate Microsoft lock-in. Now, the reason you'd use it, so you've got this increase in web apps and internet popularity. There's a lot of password sprawl and different URLs to remember. So the answer to this is federation. Now, it will allow you to sign on to your web and SaaS apps and not have that complexity of remembering different passwords. In addition, what federation gives, it gives you more security over your authentication mechanisms. You can see in the screenshot with Okta, you've got a variety of two-factor authentication types that you can actually utilize. And it gives you that central operational management of this identity, and you get a common logon experience. So whatever web or SaaS application that you need to connect to, you'll be redirected to this common logon page, and you'll be familiar with the process, and you'll be able to log into your apps utilizing single sign-on. So I've got a demo of what this looks like. So here you can see that I'm connecting to my workspace environment in the Citrix Cloud. That's actually redirected now back to Okta. So this is me again as a first-time user logging in. Now my Okta has been set up to enforce two-factor authentication, and I've chosen the Google Authenticator as my mechanism to actually utilize to sign me in. So I choose that I'm going to utilize an Android device. Much like before, I take my phone out, Google Authenticator app, and I scan that QR code. I will now input the code that I see on my phone. Click verify. I'll choose a pretty picture. I'll go for that flower. And I'll create my account. And now I will get my virtual apps and desktops. So much like before, I'm going to choose my line of business critical application, but there's something I want you to note here. What you'll see now is that I don't get single sign-on to my virtual apps and desktops. Now, remember I've mentioned before about the importance of FAS. If you're going to use Federated Identity, you're going to have to use Federated Authentication Services to get that single sign-on to your applications and Citrix applications and desktops. Next feature I'll delve into, we've got something called Citrix Cloud Success. This is a bit like Project Accelerator, it provides a much wider scope of thought. It's going to guide you through a handful of questions that will lead to the creation of your very first success plan of Citrix Cloud. It's going to force you to think about defining your starting point and in turn your adoption and rollout strategies. In simplest terms, it's going to allow you to put some thought into your use case of why you're going to the cloud, your business outcome, how you're going to get that success criteria, and in what time frame you're going to achieve it in. As a quick example, if you take increased productivity as your use case to go to the cloud, but the business outcome is bring your own device, then the success criteria will be reducing costs on corporate devices over a defined period. So it sort of makes you think about why you're moving, how you can prove the success. And to be honest, it actually provides a good methodology, not just for Citrix Cloud, but for other projects you might want to be engaged in. If you fall into any of the following categories, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service is definitely worth a look. If you think of where the solution was a couple of years ago compared to now and where it will be in a couple of years, you know, the parity gap is closing or has closed. If you're also, I'm not going to touch upon this too much, it's time for that will be a separate webinar, but if you are entertaining WVD and you are an Azure house, obviously, in my opinion, the best way to do it would be through CVADs, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service. So leveraging the cloud plane management. So you're going to get the bells and whistles you need to optimize Win 10 multi-session. And currently, in terms of density and performance, you know, some people out there say it's needed. There are various partners that provide the enhancement of WVD, but Citrix is proven enterprise class technology. Where I sort of see the value of WVD for now is in a DR scenario, or maybe for snow days or burst workloads. Okay, so wrapping up, the enterprise can be won over. You just need to understand your benefits, your soft costs, your hard costs. You're going to need to understand the enterprise features that you can leverage and use. Understand your use case. So I've mentioned you've got the Success Accelerator kit that you can use, and that will help you identify why you're moving to the cloud and what your goals are. I've touched upon the parity gap has massively reduced. In fact, all Citrix development is cloud first. It's feature rich, and also hot off the press, something I don't know too much about yet, but you can utilize AppV. So AppV functionality is now available in Citrix Cloud. So you can add the AppV package to the delivery controller in your cloud configuration. The Virtual Apps and Desktop Service AppV package discovery module available in Citrix Downloads will allow you to import the AppV packages and register to Microsoft AppV servers. So for more information on that, see Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service Discovery Module for AppV packages and servers. I'll find a link after this webinar and post that out to anyone who's interested. Lastly, I just want to say, if you're not already, get on board with the Citrix User Group community, CTA, CTP. There is a Slack channel called World of EUC. Has lots of like-minded folk on it that are willing to help and provide answers. And there is a Citrix SME channel on Facebook. That's me done.
Thanks, Gareth. I guess we can wrap up the whole webinar with a few questions, if everyone's got a few minutes. So I guess the first question coming out there from someone for you, Gareth, is what network connection do I need from my on-premise to Citrix Cloud, a VPN or an express route?
You don't need any connection like that to the Citrix Cloud. It's only outbound TCP, internet connectivity. So all traffic is TLS encrypted, and it's outbound through your cloud connectors, and it's 443.
Okay, so you would recommend probably dual internet circuits for high availability, etc. Yeah.
I would.
Cool. Another question coming through is, so if you're using your on-prem gateway for AAA, that seems to be, you seem to be losing a big chunk of the cost savings for going to Citrix Cloud. Can you address that answer or that question?
So the whole point of the redirection to an on-premises gateway is to if you're an enterprise and you want to leverage an already infested, expensive two-factor authentication solution, you have a way now of actually still going to the Citrix Cloud and utilizing that two-factor authentication solution. Because what I did used to hear is some customers would say, oh, I've just invested so much money in this solution, but you're saying I now can't use it. So it's removing a blocker if people do want to go to that Citrix Cloud and utilize the workspace.
And it's also right in saying, Gareth, it's a journey to the cloud, so it's not shifting everything in one go. It can often take years to move it, so it's having that flexibility of having on-prem solutions and on-prem investment while the journey starts to the cloud, and eventually we'll go there. Another one was around policies disappearing. I think this related to weaknesses in the cloud. Can you
Yes.
maybe elaborate on that?
It didn't happen to me specifically. It's one of my colleagues who actually mentioned it to me, but they basically, yeah, it is how it sounds. They configured Citrix policies, but it was in the Citrix Cloud, in the studio management, and for one reason or other, they found it difficult to find their policies the next working day. So ringing up to Citrix, these apparently weren't backed up, so my colleague wasn't best pleased. Now, there are ways around that. When I've mentioned that when I was addressing the weaknesses. If you want to be in complete control, utilize your Active Directory or put your Citrix policies in there, and then it's up to you to back up. There is a mechanism supposedly where you can actually back up Citrix Cloud policies. I've not done it myself, but if you have the GPMC management on your cloud connectors and you have the remote SDK, you are able to log in and retrieve the policies that you've configured in the Citrix Cloud. There is a video somewhere as well that I can dig out and find, and I'll send that along with any other links that people might be interested in.
Perfect, Gareth. And I guess there's a final question. I don't mind answering this one. So what's the roadmap for ADT, DTLS for the Citrix Gateway service on Citrix Cloud? So I guess this has been an ask really out there for a while around bringing what is an on-premise feature in the Citrix Cloud. The good news, I guess, is it's been delivered in parallel with the Rendezvous protocol. So the Rendezvous protocol, I think that Gareth called out earlier, is a way of kind of directly going from the VDAs to the client rather than going through the connector. There was issues when this was initially released, but that's kind of been deployed out in Q4 this year. Once that deployment has completed, there is a parallel activity there of introducing the EDT protocol. So watch this space in the next month or two around announcements and what's new around Citrix Workspace. I guess that's it from the webinar itself. If there's no more questions, Stephanie, I think we're happy enough to close the call. And obviously, if you have any questions, we're available on the normal channels, normal Twitter handles that were called out previous today. Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah, so just as I mentioned at the top of the hour, that I would put some links in the chat for you. So there's links in there for the virtual event next week, for the buy one, get one pass for Citrix Synergy. Also put an events calendar link for you for all of our CUGC events coming up. And the survey link is there. I know that some of you are interested in joining the World of EUC Slack channel. I just went on there and tried to find an invite link that I could share, but I didn't see one available to me, but I can invite you. So if you'll just note in the questions if you'd like to join, I can take care of that offline. And other than that, just want to remind you all to follow us on Twitter at myCUGC. That's how you get the most up-to-date information about what events are going on and what we're into. And we'll definitely be posting a lot more about Synergy because I know it's in May, but it's really not that far away. So hopefully we'll see a lot of you there as well. All right, and just finally, I want to thank Gareth for presenting to us today. I know that it's late in the day for him and also for Wilkie. So thank you both for being on this webinar today. I really appreciate your time.
Not a problem, Stephanie.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
All right, I hope you all have a great rest of your day and hope to see you on another CUGC webinar again soon. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.